Welcome everybody to tonight's xLights Gem series on the base and show folders and how to set them up in xLights. With Alex, we'll be giving the class. As I said before, any questions, please raise your hand and put your question in chat or wait till the end for a Q&A session. With that, I'll take it over to you, Alex. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, and thanks everyone for coming. Good evening. So today we're gonna go sort of the different ways of doing show folders, right? So previously we had previews, show folders, base show folders. Oh my. As it's always the case in xLights, we have multiple ways of doing the same thing, and sometimes you have the right tool for the right thing to do. So I'm Alex. I'm one of the regular Zoom room guys in here. I've been around for a few years now. I've started doing my show during the pandemic, like most of us have done, and uh, I haven't looked back ever since. So with that, let's take a look at the multiple ways of handling multiple shows. So assuming you could see this. So I have in here just a blank show folder, right? It is just a folder called show. And let's take a look at the different ways of handling this, right? So as you could imagine, when you start setting up, we're gonna set up like a little, outline in here, nothing big, right? And nothing drawn to scale or anything. Um, and we're gonna say that, this is gonna make this like 200 pixels or so. And then we're gonna add some windows, right? Oh, stop doing this. That's gonna happen a lot. You have windows. I'm gonna do a little door. All right, so let's make believe that this is um our Christmas show, right? So we're gonna add, a couple of stars or spinners, right? We're gonna add, let's say, a mega tree, right, and a star on top, and then maybe let's say an archer too. Okay. So this is kind of like what everyone is starting with, right? It looks like a little robot. But so let's assume for a second this is your show, right? And you started, you want to grow, and then now you want to do a Halloween show, right? So obviously, this is all, Christmassy kind of thing, and then you want to put in a Halloween. We don't have any native Halloween props, so I'm just going to download one. Let's go download a wannabe Halloween thing. What should we get? Um, or Halloween. Let's go with the ghost. All right, so we're gonna go inside the ghost. Sure, let's import them. Right. So now, I'm sort of doing, double things, right? So I want to replace that spinner with the ghost. And let's say I want to add um another ghost to this other side. Stop doing that. And of course, we can have them be the same way. So we're going to rotate this guy, horizontal flip, right? So now I'm starting to build my Halloween show, right? But obviously I have things in here that are Christmas and Halloween at the same time. So one original way of handling this, and depending on your layout, depending how complex it is, depending on how many things you have in common between your different shows, you could actually use previews, right? So you could come in here and create a new preview. So I created a Christmas preview, which of course in here there's nothing, and a Halloween preview, right? So let's see how we could use this. When you generally create a model or groups and what have you, they go into the default preview, right? But what we could do is we could come in here, for example, we could select all of these, right? And let's say we're going to bulk edit and we're going to make them available in all previews, right? So now if I go back to my Christmas and my Halloween, they all look the same. Okay, well, nothing big in there, right? But then what we could do is we could come in here and, for example, and select the two ghosts, and let's move these to the Halloween preview, right? And then we could do, for example, let's do the tree and the star and the arches and move those to the Christmas preview. Okay. So now when I go look at my Christmas preview, it's just my Christmas items. When I look at the Halloween preview, oh, I somehow have the spinners in there. Why did I put the spinners in there? The spinners should be, I thought maybe I forgot to move them. Yeah, I want to move them just in Christmas. Okay. So now I could manage my show, if it's not a lot of items and things like that, or the original way of doing it using the previews. So if I go into my Christmas preview, it's just my Christmas items. If I go into my Halloween preview, it's just my Halloween items, right? With everything that I designated as all previews, being the things that are in common. In this case, the house outline, the windows, and the door. And by doing it this way, keeping it all within one show folder, right? If you make a change to the window, for example, if I want to change this and say, well, it's not 16 at the top, and bottom, right? Or maybe it is, and the sides are, I don't know, make it 25. Oh, that looks much better, right? If I make this 25, I make that change only in one place, and no matter what preview I go in, that change is reflected in there, right? So again, you could keep everything in here, and you just make one change to your common props, and you move your props between the two different layouts for what you want it to be in Halloween, what you want it to be in Christmas. Now, the one downside of using this is that when you're in 3D mode, it still works, right? You could still change your previews and do that. You can't really adjust your previews. You always have to drop out of 3D and come in here and move things around and then go back to your 3D. Okay. The other sort of quirk of doing this, and it's probably, honestly, I didn't notice it until I was going through this earlier today, and we could probably make that change since we recently made it to the visualizer, is that when you go and you create a sequence, regardless the preview that you're in, they're always going to be in here, right? So of course you could come in here and hide them, right? Or what you could do is you could come to your layout, and let's say if you're working on Christmas, right, you could come in here, and even though you're not doing anything with Halloween, you could come in here and you could inactivate the models, right? So they sort of become hidden. And with a potential little change, we could actually get rid of inactive models from here, right? So it will keep this list clean, just like we've recently done it for the controllers, right? So that's sort of the old, OG way of handling different shows all within one folder, using the preview. We're sort of going away from that, and we're using preview for other things. But if your show it's not large, or if you're just starting and you want to sort of manage it the easy way, this would be a way of doing that. Any questions on using preview to manage your shows? No? Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the other way of doing it. So now I should have brought everything back down into my default. And I'm going to activate these guys. So now they show up in here, right? So let's say, you have a more complex show, and you really don't want to do that. You want to keep things separately. You would hear us in here when you come in here. It's like, hey, just make a copy of a couple of the files, and then you end up with two different show folders, right? So let's go do that. To do that, right? This is my show folder, like we said before, right? So at the same level, right? You never want to put a show within a show folder. They always have to be at the same level, or total disjoint. So let's go in here, and then we're going to create a new folder. Let's call this one Halloween. Okay. Now, what we generally do is there's two main files, sometimes three, that you could copy from one show folder to the other, in order to make an exact copy of that show folder. You generally don't want to copy the entire folder, although you could. You could literally just copy the show folder, rename it. But if that is your Christmas folder, right? It's got your Christmas sequences and um, palettes and media and all of that stuff. You probably don't want to bring that over to your Halloween. So generally, to just start clean with just your controllers and layout, you could copy two files. The two files are the networks XML file. That is the definition of your controllers. In this case, we haven't set up any yet. Set up some later. And the RGB effects file. Those are the minimum two files that will get you a copy of your show the way it is right now. The third one that you sometimes hear us say, it's the key bindings. And the key bindings, you need to bring that over if you customize your own key bindings. If you haven't done any customizations, you don't really need it. It doesn't hurt to bring it. But definitely, if you've made changes to the default key bindings and you added your own, then you want to copy that file, because that file, as of right now, it's within the show folder, right? So you don't want to try to use a key binding that you define in one show folder and go to the other one, and it doesn't work. So at least the two, sometimes three, depending on what you're doing. So we're going to copy these. We're going to go into a Halloween folder, and we're going to paste them in here, right? And just like that, we created a copy of our show folder. So let's see how that works. I go back to the controllers, and I could change permanently, temporarily, doesn't matter. It goes change permanently. And I'm going to go back to up one folder. I'm going to go into my Halloween folder, and I'm going to select that. I don't care about the sequence. And then I'm going to come in here, and oh my gosh, it looks the same. And it should, right? Because we actually made a copy, right? So now that we have a copy of that, whether you had some Halloween things in there or not, I could safely come in and start deleting things that are Christmas, right? Because this is my Halloween folder. So I could come in here, I could delete these two items. Obviously, my house will stay the same, my Halloween, and I'm going to save this. So now this is my Halloween folder. I could do anything I want in here. I could let's say go in and just put in another prop, or is it like, I don't know, a pumpkin, right? Right, or two or three, right? Because they're nice and they talk nice, right? And this is now my disjoint show folder that I could do anything in here that's Halloween related, and it's not going to affect my my Christmas folder. So I could save this. I could now go back in. Let's say if I restore to permanent, which is my shuffle. Actually, let's do this. Let's go back to Halloween, right? And then I'm gonna go back in now that I made that copy, right? I'm gonna go back into my file system in here. And what I originally called my show, I'm gonna change this to Christmas, because now this is gonna be my Christmas one. Right? and I could come in here and say change permanently. And now I have Halloween and Christmas. I'm going to go to Christmas. And of course, this is my original one, so I could get rid of the things that I don't want um for Halloween to be in Christmas. And then as you could see in here, the pumpkins or the ghosts are not in here because those are in the other folder, right? So now I have totally two separate folders, each with their own groups and models and controllers, and I just manage them separately. When I move from one holiday to the other, you simply come to the controllers tab and you either change temporarily if you just want to make some quick changes, or permanently if you're working for the next couple of months or something on your show. And of course, just like it starts slow, but it grows really fast. You could have as many folders as you want in here for different holidays, right? In my case, I have lots of them, right? 4th of July, Christmas in July, Halloween, Mardi Gras, Labor Day, Star Wars, all of the different shows that I sometimes put on, or try to change. Last year I actually had one for camping. We went camping, so I brought some of my props with me. So I created a show folder for that, in St. Patrick's Day. Now, the one downside of doing this is that you have to manage all of the models and props in two different places, right? So if, for example, I whatever, let's say this door is not right. Well, I don't want to do that, right? Let's say I have this door and I realize, okay, it's not 16 across or 50, and let's say it's I don't know, 20 and 40, right? Or you wanna add something that is I don't know, let's say you install another window or something, right? And you put another window in here, right? And you go in and say, okay, 20, right? The smaller window, maybe 15. That looks better, right? And that's going to be in your permanent setup, right? It's going to be in every show. You're going to have to go do this um, in all of your shows that you have. Now, it's not so hard to do it. You just have to remember to do it. So right now we're in our Christmas show, right? We've added a model, and I could switch back to my Halloween show. And of course, that is not in there, right? But I could simply right click on it and import previous models group. I could choose my other show, Christmas, and choose the RGB effects file. And in this case, I figure I added window frame 4, right? So click OK, and poof, there it is. So now I have the same window that I now consider to be a common element in all of my shows. I now imported that into my Halloween show folder as well. If you do 3, 4, 5, 6 different shows, if you put it in and you do a change to a common thing, you're gonna have to do that in every show folder, right? You have to remember that. Also, if you have something, for example, let's say if you add some, HD prop or something, right? So let's go add, I don't know, showstopper spinner, right? Um, and then you say, okay, well, this is going to be in all of my shows, right? Because even it's a spinner, it works well in all of them. I could put effects on it. Then that's easy. You could go back just like we did with this one. You could import it into your show one time and be done, right? But what happens when there's new submodel or new state effects and new things being added to that? You're going to have to go back and do that in every one of your show folders. And that's where I started having problems. I have quite a few HD props. They were always being changed and updated and things added to it, or I added things to them myself. and I would be working on one, my Christmas show, and I got it all ready and done. And then, several months later, I would come back and I would work on a different show, whether it be Christmas in July or Halloween. And I'm sitting there, for 20 minutes scratching my head, like, why is this thing not working the way it should work? I know I made the changes. Well, I did, but I made it in the Christmas folder, which has nothing to do with my Halloween folder. So now I have to go back and remember what were those changes, what were all those models, or just go back and delete this model and add it back in again, right? So when you manage your show folders, whether you have, 2 or 17, in this manner, then you actually end up having to sort of manually manage each one of those things and keep track of them, right? Um, but fear not, there's yet another way, a better way of taking care of that problems. But before we go into that third way, any questions on sort of this way of managing your show folders, multiple copies, and what you have to copy between one and the other? No questions? Are you guys all there?
We're listening. You're doing good.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's no questions, so let's talk about, the base folder. So the idea of the base folder is that kind of like what we've done initially in here. Well, I got rid of them, right? With the models in all previews, right? You could choose your models that you want to always be in every show folder you create, and you put those into its own folder, right? So just like we did before, let's go in here and I don't know, doesn't really matter. Let's copy this folder. In this case, I'm going to copy the whole folder because I really don't have any sequences or anything else like that. So I'm going to call this one base, right? Simple. That's my base folder, right? And I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to change temporarily and go back in. And now I'm setting up my base folder. New file found, sure, whatever, doesn't matter, right? So it says base. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to delete everything in here that I don't consider base, right? So obviously, the Halloween, all these Halloween things, get out of here, right? So this is my base folder now, right? So I said, hey, every time I set up a show, whatever it is, I'm going to have the outline, the windows, the door, and the showstopper spinner in there. And then what I also like to do for my base folder, I actually like to keep all of my controllers in the base folder. So no matter whether I use them or not in a show, they're always available for me. And I don't always use the same controllers, as we're going to talk about later. I don't always use the same controllers, but I like to have, I have some, test controllers or some different ones. I put them in my base folder, so no matter what show folder I'm in, they're always going to come in there and they're going to be available for me. I make the change if you want to make a change to, we're going to see later, to brightness or something. You make it in one place, it's available everywhere. Okay. So now I've created my base folder, which is really sort of the foundation for all of my other show folders. Now, switching back to, let's go back to the Christmas. So now in here, I'm going to do the opposite, right? In here, I'm going to delete everything that it's not, or that's considered base, right? So will be those, right? So my Christmas is the spinners, the mega tree, or star, and the arches. Notice how I don't have the spinner or anything else in here, right? And obviously I would do the same thing for Halloween. I'm not gonna waste time going there, but you'll do the same thing for Halloween and just leave the pumpkins and the ghosts. So in order to activate the base folder, you'll go into the xLights preferences, and under View, there's an option that says Enable Base Show Folder. So turn that on, and as soon as you turn that on, you get a new set of options in here to do that. You don't necessarily, once you turn it on, you don't have to have a base folder for every one of your show folders, right? Like in here, there's nothing selected, right? Even though the option's turned on, I haven't told Christmas, hey, overlay, start with the base folder, and on top of that, bring in Christmas, right? So you don't all it's not like you always have to do it, right? You have the option if it's a throwaway, if it's a test, if whatever the case may be, you don't always have to use it. But now what I could do is I could come in here and I could say change. And I'm going to go back in and I'm going to say, okay, set my base folder be my base folder, right? Again, I like to keep things nice and simple. And if I come in here, ooh, nothing happened. That's not good. Well, you have these two options, right? You could automatically update. So anytime you open Christmas, it will refresh the whole layout from base, or you can manually update it. It doesn't take that long, especially with this thing. So we're just gonna do an auto update, unload, and I'm gonna manually update it. So now it found some items that were the same, right? That were came in from the other one. So we're just going to override them. And notice what happened, right? I have no controllers in my Christmas folder, but it brought them in from my base folder. And they're a funny different color, right? You can't really make any changes to them because they're managed in the base show folder, right? So if you right click on it, you could of course unlink them if you want. But the idea here is that it's highlighted. It says, no, you can't make any changes. You can look at it, but can't touch. If you want to make changes to those, you have to go back into the show folder, the base show folder, and do that. And in the layout, if I now come into the layout, because I updated that, now it brought in my my base show folder, which is, the outline, the windows, and my showstopper spinner. And again, notice how, I can't move it and it's got a purple different thing. It's the same idea, right? It says, hey, this is coming from the base show folder. It's managed in the base show folder. If you want to make any changes to that, go do it in there. So to do that, right, you could simply click on the open button and that would automatically open the base folder. So just switch right back to the base folder. So for example, you said, oh yeah, I forgot that, I want to change my default port brightness on this, or I want to come in here and I'm going to add another showstopper spinner, or even though it might sound crazy, right? I might want to put like the the crazy the showstopper mini trees, right? Because now you could do them for pretty much anything, right? With all the different states effects and stuff. And gonna say these are gonna be part of my every show that I'm gonna have. And because I'm doing this in the base show folder, right? I'm gonna save that. I changed the controller and I added 3 props in here. And now if I switch back to I think it was in Christmas, right? Now notice that my controller has changed port brightness because I have it to automatically update for my base folder. So I just made that one change in one place. And no matter how many show folders I happen to have, right? So 2 in this case, right? Plus the base, right? That will then be propagated through all of the show folders. And then I come in here and those additional models that I now say, hey, you guys are part of my base folder. They also automatically came into my current layout. So now I'll move the ones that are not part of the base, because the base ones will be locked, right? They'll stay where you want because that's the whole purpose, right? And then I could just move everything else to where I want. do that. Let's say I want to change that. So even though in this example, let's say I just added a, another bay window or something in here, right? Even though the layout and the doors and stuff are coming from the base, I could still add things, I could move this, in here, right? It doesn't really matter. Where you put it, you could put it over or, intertwine it with with your existing show folder. Does that make sense so far? Any questions? I know I probably went through a lot without stopping for questions.
Well, so question, so you're changing those stars you just moved. That's in the Christmas um folder, so that doesn't change those in the base. You go back to base, those are still up at the top, correct?
No, because the base does not have the stars. The stars only exist in
That's
the
just Christmas. Okay.
right? So, if you look in here, right, we added like a little hat in here and like, eyes or whatever you want to call it, right? Go in there. If we go back to, if we click on open and we go back to our base, they're not there,
Right.
right? But for example, it's like, I don't know, it's like, let's say I want, um, probably not the right way of doing that. Let's say, I don't know, do another window, right? Let's say I want to put another window here, right? I don't want to worry about it. And then I save this, right? I've added some to my base layout. When I go back to my show folder, right, because it's updated, that came in,
Yeah.
right? So the great thing about using those base show folders is that you make the change in one place, and for those common props that are available in that you designated and say you're going to use in every show, you only make it in one place. So it doesn't become a management nightmare to keep track of, I changed this or I changed that group or I have updated submodel and what have you,
Mhm.
right? So especially with, even recently there were like two states effects added to the showstopper mini trees, right? Imagine if you use that in 2, 3, 4, 5 shows, you're gonna have to do it in each one of them. By using the base show folder, you literally just come in, sure, whatever. I don't know what I changed. You come in here, you do it once in one place, right? You could add even more props if you designate them as being in common. And then as soon as you switch over to the other folder, um, they'll just show up in there and you can start using them. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a 3D layout. I assume like the OBJ files or any JPEGs or anything that I have in as 3D objects probably should just be maybe a subfolder of my base folder.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And they would have to. I do 3D, so yeah, I have them in every folder because I think each one of them. I'm not sure if the 3D comes through, so you would put that in the 3D subfolder. So in my case, right, if I go into well, let's see, right, Christmas. Actually, no, I lied. It doesn't have to be. It's just in base. Wait, where is base? Oh, base is not 3D. Okay.
All the OBJs are out there in the folder before this one.
Oh, that's right. I only kept. Okay, thanks. Yeah, what is it? I have that. I have that. All right, what am I missing? Where did you see them?
Is it in the next one? Not in the year, but the next folder up. Next
Okay.
one.
I mean, that's like my.
There's a 3D folder there.
Yeah, but there are, but they're not in my media folder. I thought they would have been in my in each show folder, but I guess not. I guess you just point them to whatever you want, and I just only had it in one place. Yeah, I forgot I even did that. And I do some other things too because I store my show folders on a NAS and my FSIC files locally. So in order to not replicate images, I do some other crazy stuff with symlinks and things like that. But yeah, I believe if you set up your base folder to be 3D, that will come in. And you notice too, because you made a copy of and you should, right? You should start with making copies just like we did of one of your folders and sort of propagate that when not only when you use the base show folder, but when you import from one layout to the other using the import preview models groups, it puts it pretty much in the same place, right? Because they're all based on the same folder. If you have different folders and different perspectives and different sizes, then just gonna throw them whatever the original one is, and then you're gonna have to move them into place. But by starting with copies of the same one, when you import them, they're all pretty much in that same spot, right? And that would help you. That will help you a lot. Any other questions?
And just to add to that, Alex, something else that you can do with 3D is you can have an image in the 3D in the base. And then if you decide that you want to have another image of a different house for just Christmas, because maybe your neighbor is allowing you to decorate their house for Christmas, you can actually put another OBJ just in the Christmas folder, just like you do with your Christmas props. And it will only show up in the Christmas folder and not the Halloween.
Right. You won't have two OBJs. You'll have one. You'll replace the one that's in there with the new one that has presumably both.
I actually have both OBJs.
Oh, yeah, okay. You add
Technically, I have 5 of them.
file. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, so one thing that I have not covered yet, and that is, well, if you have things in base and you have the controllers in here, can you manage, can you visualize the props that are in your base show folder in here? And you absolutely can, right? So if, for example, let's say this is, again, this is my base folder. I always have them. I might have, let's assume I have, permanent lights on whatever on a controller and it's always out there. Sure, you could do that, right? You could just go put them in. I don't know, it doesn't really matter, right? And then let's put this in here and let's go have the showstoppers, those things on their own port, right? And I'm gonna go save this, right? So now I have everything on this spare controller. Now, when I go back to my permanent one and I open up my controller, they're all in here in the same place. Okay, so you could manage them if you want, if you like, from your base folder. I choose not to. It's a personal choice. I choose not to, mostly because well, I don't always use the same controller depending on what I'm doing. So even though they're permanent and I always use them, I might connect them differently depending on how big or small the show is. And to me, this is pretty easy to go handle and do that. The other reason that I don't do that is if you were to do it like I have in here and visualize them in the base folder, you could only bring in items from your current show folder at the end, right? So you could drag them off at the end, and this is perfectly okay, right? What you cannot do is put arches in between the windows, right? Or whatever, snowflakes or whatever you have, right? You cannot break the chain that it's coming from the show folder. Well, I'm sorry, from the base folder, right? And for me, that's a problem because the way obviously the outline and the windows are part of my permanent layout for my base layout, but I put in, bats, for example, or snowflakes in the windows, depending on the holiday, or stars, right? And the chain in here changes, right? So even though my windows are permanent and they're done, I actually daisy chain props in front of the first window. Then I might go to the window and then out of the window to something that I put in the middle of the window, right? And that doesn't work with base. If you use base, you could add models, but only at the end of it, not in front of them. So because of that, I just choose not to do any visualization, place any models on the controllers in my base folder, and I just do all of that in my show folder. It just works for me, and do it whichever way you want, but just keep in mind, like you said, that you can't intertwine. So even though I've added these in here, right? If I save this, and now I go back to my base folder, they of course are not going to be there, right? Because they don't exist in that show folder, so that's fine. And now when I go back to my Christmas folder, they're gonna the additional ones that I placed in, they're gonna be there, right? And just to show you how this works, now if I go back into my Halloween, that really we haven't touched much, right? Well, we didn't set base folder for that, right? So I'm gonna go set it up now. Base, open, update. Initially, you're gonna get this model clash because it finds things in both of them from before, right? So I have my controllers, the 30% that we set up, the models that are done in there, right? Because I chose in this case to handle that on the base folder, and I come into the layout and right, again, because the way they were placed, it brought in the things from the base folder and then everything else that I have. So for me, really, the big problem that I had is I did have multiple folders, individual separate folders, and it became a nightmare to manage and update models and submodels and states and faces. Which is really when Keith introduced this base show folder. It to me was like really useful. So I jumped on that pretty much as soon as that was introduced. We worked out some quirks with it, but it just makes sense. So that way, if you have things, especially with the high definition things or the HD props with multiple models groups and that constantly get updated, you could manage them all in one place and you don't have to worry about it. Of course, if I have, I'm in Halloween in here, right? Let's say I have these pumpkins, right? And let's say, there's changes to them. Well, if I only have the pumpkins in this one folder, I still only change them in one location, right? In the Halloween folder. So it's still the same thing, right? But if I have, something like this and that it's in my base folder and I use it a lot, then I'll switch back to that. There is one little thing that it's sort of a little bit of annoying. And I found a bug today that it ought to be fixed because honestly, I'm not sure how it works. So if you're in your show folder and you wanted to look at the submodels or the faces, right, or the state effects for one of the models that comes from the base folder, you can't, right? See how this is, it doesn't let you even scroll through them. It's locked, right? Because it's coming from the other folder, doesn't let you manage it. However, sort of a back doorway, and it's really not that big of a deal. But if you use the keyboard shortcuts, the key bindings, right? So in my case, I have, M for submodels. You could bring it up so you could take a look at them. Right. So even though you shouldn't change them in here, right? Because you should manage everything in your base folder for that. If you have a question and you're in here, you don't have to jump out of it to just look at some of the models or figure out, what the state's effects are, or, does it have faces on it, or what have you. Right. So if I hit S, right, I could see all the state effects. Even though I can't get to them via this menu, by using the key bindings and the keyboard shortcuts, you could still bring it up. You could look at it, but don't make any changes. Don't change anything in here because they will not propagate upwards. And next time when you come in and you open the folder, because of this update, it should overwrite. It will overwrite what you have in your base folder, and that change will be gone. Make sense? Any questions? I see a couple of questions in chat. Thanks. Thanks, guys, for answering. Anything else that needs to be answered?
Oh.
When using a preview method, how are models appearing on the controller layout if they are using the same port, like a star that uses the same port as the bat?
I believe that's what you just went over. You'd have to move them and then just re-push.
Right. Well, she said the preview method, so that will be the first time.
Yeah,
Right?
the first.
So the first time you would be just one thing, you wouldn't place them on it, right? So if you're working on, obviously I can't go back to, but like let's assume, well, let's go back in here, like, right? Let's say this is you have your preview and stuff, right? And you want to visualize something. If you're working on Halloween, you would not drag in, Christmas tree, right? If that's what you have, because it shows up in the list. Now, and actually you would not even be able to, because in 25.4, right, that's what's out, right? If you inactivate, right? So I don't know if I mentioned that, but I did, like when I inactivated the ghost, right? If you inactivate a model, right? So let's say you're working on Christmas and you went through and it's like, okay, let me inactivate my Halloween or other shows. When you inactivate them as of 2025.4, they will not show up in this list, right? So you wouldn't even be able to drag them over. However, they will still show up in your sequencer. And I think we could make the same change in here. So if you have a model that's inactive, I think we should be able to remove it out of here. So that way it won't show up. So if you choose to do a lesser sort of way of managing it by previews and keep everything within one show folder, you won't constantly have to remove them from here. As long as you manage the activation and deactivation of the props that you're not working with to keep things simple and clean, you don't have to, right? It's just another way of managing it. Then we could remove it out of here too. Any other questions?
Okay.
Clear as mud?
There's mine. All right. With that, thank you, Alex.
You forgot one spot though, Alex. Groups. You can do groups in the base show folder too.
Oh, of course, yes. Yeah, thanks. So anything that you put in that, so I think actually did I see base folder. Right, so base folder,
Share your screen again.
right? So in my base folder, when I imported some of those, there were some groups that came along with it, right? So if I go now into save that to Christmas, hopefully, right? Those groups also came in here. Now, that brings up actually a very good point. So one of the things that you shouldn't do And honestly, I haven't found a good way of doing it. You really cannot have in your base group, you cannot have an all pixels group, right? Because it will get overwritten when you bring it into your show folder because it's really not all pixels, right? You don't have the items in there. So while it lets you bring it in, it's not really a good way of managing it because if you were to truly make a change to your old group for whatever reason in the base folder, it doesn't really do like modification, adds and deletes. It just takes the whole group over. So just like we see in here, groups that are related to models, or for example, like a roof line that nothing else will go in there, you could certainly put it in your base folder, right? But if you want to have a group that is like all yard, I wouldn't create it in the base folder. I will have that all yard and all pixels and things like that in your actual show folder. Of course, there's the age-old question about, can you have groups in groups? So can you create some groups to bring it in? Yes, you can, as long as you understand the ramifications of that and the sequences that goes with that, you could do that. It's probably not something that I would recommend to deal with because there will be some limitations. So because of that, just like we've seen here, any groups that are related to the models themselves that you want to manage in here, like, a spinner group, let's say, if you have in this, yes, put it in here. And then your whole house, your yard left, whatever, then manage those in your show folder.
Okay, I think we're good. Alex, again, thank you. Everybody, will see you next Wednesday. Have a great night.